Good morning and welcome back to Buffalo-Plaid Breakfast. I'm Jeremy Pogue with my co-host, Jan Broshenek. We're here today to have some conversation about some cybersecurity and share some coffee. How are you, Jan?
I am blessed. On the topic of coffee, did you know that bees are the main pollinators of coffee plants? The way coffee plants reproduce is by making a sweet nectar-like flower that are pollinated by bees. And they also contain caffeinated nectar. So the caffeine makes the bees more alert, which they're more efficient at gathering pollen and transporting it back to their hives. And caffeine has that same effect on us, obviously. It boosts our moods by blocking specific receptors in our brains, which are responsible for making us sleepy. Along with sugar, and caffeine creates an alertness boosting combination that makes us feel more awake and alert. So I'm feeling a little bit more awake and alert. How about you?
It has helped me today for sure. We've talked about it offline and just got back from IT Nation secure down there in your neck of the woods, and travel always makes me tired. So it's wonderful in the morning to get some coffee. And it's interesting coming back into the real world from those and some of the just craziness that we're seeing pop up on the news, right? Potentially the largest breach in history.
Yeah. Snowflake, as we discussed, turning into a really large snowball now, rolling down the mountain, about to crush things in its path.
Yeah.
Snowflake is a cloud storage vendor that has thousands of companies as customers. And through a single account breach, apparently there's been lots and lots of data that's been collected.
Yeah, I think we've got a long time until we hear the full scope of what this one's going to touch. I know we've talked about, what is it, AutoZone, I've heard, Ticketmaster, are two of the big ones that I've heard. But they're saying, it's just ongoing, right? I've heard terabytes of data coming from AutoZone. I've heard, millions of people from Ticketmaster having their information stolen. So it's just going to continue growing. And like you said, a single person's credentials allowed the initial access, and then it just blew up.
Yep. We've got Allstate, Anheuser-Busch, Mitsubishi. The list keeps going.
Yeah. Being out of it for a couple of days, right at that conference, I came back to it. I'd heard, rumblings of the Snowflake, and then this morning, as I got up, getting to read more into it, it's amazing. It is just astounding, and it all started with one person giving their password away, or potentially just having it cracked.
Yeah, so we definitely need to be talking about, password management.
Yeah. That's password management is one of those things that for years we've talked about, right? I mean, we've all talked about it starting back in the day where it was just create a password. A password's better than nothing, and now we talk all this time about MFA, but the password is still there and still very key.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dumb question, but why are weak passwords such a significant concern for us as individuals as well as organizations?
Well, passwords perform several functions. They're a defense against unauthorized access. It's a barrier preventing individuals or from malicious organizations from accessing our accounts' sensitive data. And weak passwords are kind of like leaving the front door wide open. Anyone can just waltz on in uninvited. They protect our personal information. With the amount of identity theft that's going on right now, the cyber attacks, strong passwords are the first line of defense. They shield us from those threat actors that want to get our data or financial details. And then they prevent unauthorized transactions, online banking, shopping. Having a secure password is essential. It makes sure that only you or those that you've authorized have the authority to make those purchases or transfer.
And it's funny, at the conference, there was a speaker and she mentioned even creating a password amongst your family, right? So they don't have to be just online, with a lot of the AI fakes and, calls and things like that, creating a password, just a verbal password with your family can be an additional layer of security to prevent things like fake kidnapping, ransomwares, and things like that. So passwords don't just have to be online. So as we talk through these, think of ways that we can, we should think of ways that we can transfer these into real life outside of the digital realm.
Right.
But as we talk with some of those problems with weak passwords, guessable passwords, how do criminals exploit them?
Yeah. So, weak passwords are things like dictionary words, pet names, birthdays. They're risky because they're predictable. Attackers will use tools to find common dictionary words. So if your password's in a dictionary, it's vulnerable. Your password might lack complexity to be able to withstand a brute force attack. And complexity means it's comprised of upper and lowercase characters, numbers, symbols. Some examples of bad passwords, sunshine, apple, password. And believe it or not, we find those when we do security audits at places. People use these passwords. Some of the most common passwords out there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or QWERTY. Just let your fingers walk on a keyboard. Pet names. Pet names are linked to personal experiences or shared on social media. Attackers easily can find that information. If your pet name is Fluffy, it's not a good choice. Fluffy 1, 2, 3 is a bad choice. Birthdays or common knowledge are easily discoverable. Using your birth date or a family member's birth date or important dates, anniversaries. Those are just, you're asking for trouble. Passwords need to be unique, complex, and unrelated to any easily accessible personal information.
And you made a good statement right there. And a key word I want to kind of hone in on that is the word unique, right? Yeah. Reusing passwords. Why is that a problem?
Well, reusing passwords is a nightmare because of a technique called credential stuffing or credential spraying, where if your password is breached in one location, let's say you subscribe to Skippy's dogfood.com and Skippy's dogfood.com is breached and they get your username and password or your email address and your password. Well, now they can go to your google.com account. And if you use that same password there, guess what? They're in. Or if they've seen in LinkedIn that you work at XYZ company and you've used the same password there, now they're in.
Yeah, it's and we see that all the time, right? Common passwords shared across multiple platforms. And I always like to just put this into real world examples of how we see it. It's not, a uncommon thing to see, right? And so I was actually sitting at my dentist's office waiting for my daughter's dentist appointment, and someone screamed out from the back, hey, what's the password to the computer, right? And they yelled it right out, and it was dentist 123, right? You mentioned that, right? And I mean, it's sneaky, right? I'm at the dentist office and they use dentist 123. So it's very common.
And that's probably the email password as well. So, if you go to that person's email address, you'll probably be able to log right in.
Well, they proceeded to tell me the username as well through the same process. So it was an ultimate nightmare in that regards. But ouch. It's so common that we see that, right? And it's usually not that just blatant, right? They don't usually just throw it out there, but every time I've seen a pen test done that does any kind of password cracking techniques, they always come back with one of these. It's just always out there.
And swear words, they're in the dictionary, people. They're common.
Yeah. Well, as we talk through the problem with weak passwords, what are some best practices for some of those stronger ones?
So the best practices would be things like making sure you have complexity, combining upper and lowercase characters, having numbers, special characters and symbols like exclamation marks, even a space is a special character. Avoiding those easily guessable passwords that we talked about, password 1, 2, 3, or common words. New York Yankees are number one. Well, there's going to be a lot of people that have New York Yankees are number one sitting as their password, people. And length matters. Longer passwords are inherently more secure. You should aim for a minimum of 14 characters, if possible, because some password boxes limit the number of characters, unbelievably. Or consider using passphrases, which is my personal preference. Carl will probably put up my password preference of choice. I own 3 black cats. And then beware of dictionary words. Avoid using words that are actually in dictionaries because automated attacks can easily crack them. There are massive databases available of billions of leaked passwords that threat actors use to spray against their targets to attempt to gain access. Yeah, and some of these attacks that have happened recently for that, I talk about Snowflake. That was a cracked password where they were able to get in, and huge amounts of stuff has happened bad as a result. In 2018, the Northern Irish Parliament elected officials' accounts were attacked because of a brute force attack. They had easily guessable passwords. GitHub in 2013, brute force attacked. Dropbox 2012. And the Verizon 2023 data breach report, great reading if you're at all interested in seeing the really scary stuff out there, reports that 81% of confirmed breaches were due to weak, reused, or stolen passwords.
Wow. Yeah, and it's crazy to think that they're out there, and as they compile those lists, right, it's not just a matter of they use a dictionary and go look for common ones, right? They're sharing this information, and then they're all compiling it from all of these breaches together. So even if you use a really complex, a really long, and just a random password over and over and over again, it's going to get hit, right? It's so important to make sure that you're doing things just variants, right? Not just adding a 1 to the end, not just adding a, giving a count up or count down type thing. And you mentioned passphrases. Passphrases is one of those things that I really love when people get to harp on, because we all love it on this side. But how can users create memorable passphrases on that side?
Yeah. So I mentioned one just a moment ago. I own 3 black cats. Or you could do something like, my car is a 17-year-old Ford. Just pick words that mean something to you, or even unrelated words. But it's better if it's something that's going to mean something to you. Now, my car is a 17-year-old Ford. You could take that and simply pick the first letter of each word to make it something like MCIA17YOF. And there is no way in Hades that a threat actor is going to get that, or that a password cracker will get that in any kind of reasonable time frame.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on using song titles or song lyrics as that phrase?
Only if you misspell them, because those songs are in databases.
Yes.
And that's actually one of my favorites is, of course, if I generate a password myself, I make sure that I store my password inside my password manager. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I misspell words. Well, they're not going to be in a dictionary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's simple tricks like that, right? That a lot of people don't think about when they're thinking these passphrases. I know for years, I had someone that always told me, use something like Mary Had a Little Lamb, right? And now that's everywhere, right? It was probably great, 5 years ago. But now it's on that list, right? Because everyone did it. Their favorite childhood limerick, But, if you do things like misspelling, add spaces, special characters, all of those things to just make it a little more complex. It's great, but I'll echo what you said. I have now been seeing where they replaced all the vowels with letters and symbols on lyrics in those password lists. So they're common. You need to change things up, make it a little more variety. But on the same note, great job for those of you that are using those passphrases. I'm glad to see it as opposed to password 123.
Now, don't go using like 1 for an I or an L, or a 0 for an O, or a 3 for an E. Threat actors know that. Those are the types of things that are in those dictionary attacks, and they will cut through that. And like I say, hot knife through butter.
Yeah, that we all thought we were being tricky when we did it, right?
Yeah. And at one time, it was great.
Yeah. Other things that I personally recommend is if you have a hobby, I kind of like Star Wars, as you guys can tell. Choose Star Wars characters, right? But mix them up, misspell them, change spaces, get into those lines of things. Anything that you can tie to you personally makes it much easier, but don't make it so unique that it's just you personally, just like you mentioned the nickname.
Right. And then, as we talked about, what should we do with these passwords? The other thing is, how often should we be updating passwords? You need to make sure that you're not reusing passwords. We can't stress that enough. Don't use the same password across multiple accounts. There are massive databases that the bad guys have access to. They attempt to gain unauthorized access. A best practice is to use a password manager to generate, store, and create those unique passwords for every account. And we'll talk about password managers in a moment. And then there's a lot of sources that tell you that regular updates or regularly changing passwords is something you should do every 3 to 6 months. However, Microsoft and others have recently come out with new guidance that says that the traditional advice to change passwords frequently has evolved based on research and practical considerations. And the reasons are behavioral patterns. Frequent password changes often lead the users to choose weaker, easily guessable passwords. Or if they're forced to change the password too often, people just make minor modifications like adding a digit or changing a letter, which doesn't really enhance security at all. Frequent password changes frustrate users, especially if they're having to change that often and on multiple accounts. So the focus needs to be on strong initial passwords instead of frequent password changes, making sure that they're unique, and also implementing multi-factor authentication, which really adds an additional layer, which makes it much more secure. Organizations need to adopt risk-based assessments. If there's no evidence of compromise, changing passwords isn't necessary.
And that's a good point. But my question is, now we've gone out there and we've created these really complex, really long passwords, and we're typing them in all the time. And the question I always get is, golly, I have to type in this 20-character password. You've mentioned password managers.
Yep.
Dive in. I mean, just give us some reasons why we need to get those more out there.
Password manager on my phone is my life's blood. You never have to rely on your memory. You don't need to remember all your passwords. The password manager does it for you. You just need to remember one complex, secure master password that lets you into your password manager. And that's one that you write down somewhere, stick inside of your little bank vault or your locked drawer, because most of us these days have phones and computers that support biometric authentication of some kind. Mm-hmm. I get into my password manager with my fingerprint. And it does the rest for me. And that password manager, when you're going to a site of some kind, it'll generate and suggest strong, complex passwords for those new accounts. It'll sync across your various devices so that you've got that available on multiple devices that you're using, multiple phones, multiple computers. You can also store other information in there, like credit card details, addresses, passport numbers. Those things can be saved within that password manager securely. What's beautiful about these things is, they have plugins for computers and browsers where they can autofill those login screens for your convenience. So it says, oh, I recognize this login URL. It's in my password manager. Would you like me to automatically log in for you? Jeremy had mentioned, having the family accounts. Well, you can share accounts on a lot of these password managers with your family or with your corporation. And using a password manager ensures that, okay, you've got the right password. You're not going to get locked out of your critical information.
And one thing you just kind of flew through right there that I really want to stress an importance on that stands outside of just password management of these is recognizing the URL. Right? If you have a password manager and you think you're going to Microsoft and it doesn't auto-populate, it's not really Microsoft,
Right.
so it's helping you on that phishing side as well. So
Really
I
good
know
point.
it's something that's not really talked about on these things, but it is an ancillary benefit of those.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Um, these password managers, we talk about them. My family, I fought the battle, of getting them into it. And they say it's just too hard to use, right? I have to remember that password. I have to chase it down. Um, but the ancillary benefits of not remembering them, changing them often, having it automatically at literally, like you said, your fingertips, right?
Yep.
Because you're not having to enter in that password, really makes these things so important in today's market of having a variance of it. But they also will oftentimes tell you when that site has had a breach, correct?
Definitely. Some of the common features and benefits of using the password managers, you got strong encryption. That is the bread and butter of password managers. Your data should be secured with strong encryption like AES 256 to keep it safe from prying eyes. It can do multi-factor authentication right within your password manager. So that code that may involve a fingerprint scan or from an authenticator app or security key, that can be done right within the password app. A lot of the newer password applications now support passwordless login technology from many corporations. Microsoft, Google are implementing these rapidly. In fact, I think it was 2 days ago, Microsoft came out with guidance on how to use Windows 11 with passwordless. So there's an official document now for that. Your password manager is a secure password generator. It creates those unique passwords for you. As we mentioned, it's got autofill. It's got cross-platform support, where it doesn't matter what device you're using, your desktop, your phone, your tablet, there's something that will be able to connect and talk to all of those. As we mentioned, secure sharing. As Jeremy mentioned, the secure password strength audits and breach audits, they let you know if something has happened. And your password manager gets regular updates. So you know that password manager is being secured.
Yeah, you are correct. And, we've gotten a couple good questions that have popped up as we've talked through here. Um, you know, when are passwords going to become obsolete? Right? These as we talk in the business, truly
Mhm.
these are antiquated, right? The whole idea of a password is antiquated. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're always going to have some form of password around. A password is like your first line of defense, but it shouldn't be your only defense. Um, we are rapidly moving toward what's called passwordless technology or phishing resistant login technology. Um, and the threat actors are always, playing cat and mouse. They'll catch up on the passwordless technologies and find ways to crack that as well. But the goal is to make it more difficult for those threat actors. But even with the passwordless technology, you've got to get into your authentication device, the thing that pops up the, hey, are you trying to log in? Yes or no, type of thing that happens with the passwordless login, or, tap the biometric, or, smile into the camera. Those things ultimately behind the scenes, if that piece of technology, the fingerprint or the camera isn't working, they need to have a password behind the scenes. So it's kind of like a break glass. Hey, this isn't working. Let me get in here somehow.
Yeah, and I agree there. I think we're always going to have them to an extent. Um, it'll be a generational thing as well that
Yeah.
kind of pushes it to the next level. So they're around for a while. I don't think they ever become obsolete completely. Other question we got asked is, what about storing them in your browser? I mean, Chrome, all of those, they love offering that. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts there?
Well, there are some pros and cons of using browser-based password management. The advantages: you got password generation. You can create complex, secure passwords. It'll synchronize across all your devices, and it's easy to use. And you don't need to download or install anything. As long as you're using the same browser and you've logged into it, you can get to all your passwords, and it's free. So, that's kind of cool. Now, a lot of this stuff is available in the standalone password managers as well. Now, some of the disadvantages are you've got limited features. The browser-based managers may lack advanced features found in those dedicated password managers. And cost. Password managers have paid tiers, so some are only paid via subscription. On the browser-based side, those things generally are included in. Now, while it's better than reusing a password, browser-based password managers are not as secure as specialized tools. Threat actors are quite adept at browser-based password management database exfiltration. If they get their stuff onto your machine, they are definitely capable of pulling those passwords out of those databases.
Correct. I mean, and that's my thoughts as well. Is they aren't as secure, right? It's better than nothing, but
Exactly.
the level of encryption is lower. The complexity of the system is lower, and as you mentioned, quite often you're pre-authenticated into your browser, so all they have to do is have access to your computer. And let's not
Correct.
forget cross-platform and on your phone and the ease of it at your fingertips. I mean, I can't tell you how many times at the conference I needed to log into something, and it was so convenient just to be able to do it right from my phone. So those are all the big reasons that I prefer it personally, and would recommend, not doing it, but absolutely better than nothing, right? A sticky note, is
Much
not
better than than a sticky note, or having your password list sitting in the drawer next to your desk on a bright yellow piece of paper.
Or, I mean, our favorite, an Excel spreadsheet on our desktop labeled passwords. That's the one that I still see to this day.
I send out notices to our clients on a regular basis saying, hey, our security tools found a file named password on the systems.
Yeah, they're still very common. And that's not going to change. Our goal is just kind of make some awareness out there of these things. It's always amazing to see these. As we kind of start wrapping up today, couple reminders. Integris Inspire, we still have some big events coming up. Next week we're in Duluth and Twin Cities. Make it out there if you can. Get to meet some of us in person, get to attend some of these things, and we have other things coming up later in the year. So make sure you're visiting those. Always reach out to us for more content. Click, follow, share. Mark the little bell so you can be alerted whenever we coming on live. We do this every week. And please just keep reaching out with questions, ideas, talking about these things. Jan, anything you want to say as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, let me, basically summarize what we've been talking about here. Don't reuse passwords. They should be unique for every place you log in. Don't use dictionary words. Passwords should be 14 characters or more, if possible. Don't make them predictable. Birthdays, pet names, etc. Use complex passwords, passphrases, or something derived from a passphrase, such as the one from my car is a 17-year-old Ford example. Use a password manager, ideally a standalone app for that. Let the password manager auto-generate your passwords and let it do the remembering. All you need to remember is the master password. Don't share your passwords with coworkers, family, or threat actors unless they're part of your password management system. And don't write it down on a sticky note.
That one, we still see it to this day. One of my favorite ones is we actually were moving a person to a new computer, and she had to take a picture of all her sticky notes so she knew where they were on her new monitor. So please don't be that person.
Wow.
Well, as a reminder, thank you again for everyone showing up. Keep it up. Keep what you're doing up there. Remember, the good guys wear plaid, and Jan, you always get the last word.
Keep the shields up. They really are out to get you.